All right, friends, we are on to project 2, another 30-minute journal page. And I have got some masking tape out here, and I have wanted to try this. I've done it before, but I haven't done it in such a long time. And it's just a quick, easy way to get some texture down. And probably the hardest part of this is getting the tape off the roll. But I'm just randomly kind of placing some tape here and there, thinking about my focal point and leading lines to my focal point. But really want to just kind of get some texture down. I'm going to just put little bits and pieces here and there, and then I want to fold it up too and kind of create lots of texture, and it just shows up so beautifully in the end once we get all of the goodness on there. So I'm just going to put my tape down, and again, this video is in real time. It's not sped up because I want you to see that journal pages can be done quickly and easily in just a little bit of time, and just to get you here and get you creating. I will mention that my page has been gessoed, so I've got a non-porous surface that I'm working on, and then I'm putting the tape down. I'm not putting any matte medium down or anything. This tape's pretty sticky. It does kind of come up in a couple of spots once I get my paint down, but that paint will hold it down, and then I put a little bit of matte medium over the top of it too once we get going. But you can see how I'm just kind of bunching it up and really kind of creating areas of lots of texture. And I'm moving that tape and those texture spots around the page so that I've got interest in all corners. So now that I've got my tape down, I'm going to take some gesso, and this is my Utrecht gesso. It's a little bit heavier gesso, just again to kind of hold that tape down and to add additional texture depth to it. And I'm just kind of scrubbing right on over it. And just trying to cover some of that up. Just one, because I want that tape to also have that ground, that the ground that the gesso will provide, so that paint doesn't slide off of it, because the top of it's a little bit slick. I'm moving my brush around and giving a variety of brush strokes, because again, that will add some interest and some texture to the page. We always have to think about the next right step. Whether all of that shows or not, you just do the next right thing, and then you allow the page to kind of happen and reveal itself. And so as I got things covered, I realized I wanted to have a few more pieces, and I also wanted some of that tape to not be completely covered up, but because the masking tape has a great kind of yellowish feel that's kind of rustic, and so I wanted some of that to kind of peek through. In the end, it doesn't really, but again, you have to take the next, this is what I think will look good right now, and go with that and not overthink the end result. And while this is wet, I'm going to drop some ink in, because a lot of times you can get some really great effects by dropping your ink into wet paint. Give it a little spritz of water. That's going to move the gesso around a little bit too. It's going to mix. And as I started doing this, I felt like the background was really stark and really white, and I should have put a layer of umber or something on that to kind of tone it down just a bit. So you'll see what happens next. There's always a plot twist in as we create, and you just have to go with the flow. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can kind of pull some of that out, pick some of it up. I just wasn't liking how it was looking. And so I kind of walked away a little bit, and I thought, well, I'll kind of lighten up some of the edges and drag in some of that ink into the really white spots. And I wasn't liking that either. And you can see my hesitation, like, what do I do? So as I started to wipe away the edges a little bit more, I liked that color on the background. I liked that warmness of the background. So what do? You just go with it. So I wiped all of that away. And now that background has this warm feel that I liked. And if we can take the approach in our journal pages that everything is an experiment and nothing is ruined, even if the page stopped right here, this is a great page to respond to at another time. So now I come back with my ink again because I like that background so much more. And I always look at it as a lesson learned as well, because I was trying to do something different, and yet my gut was like, I didn't like it. And so sometimes we have to take that risk and try something new, and then be willing to say, no, I like it the other way. This way it shows off the texture so much more. So now I'm going to prepare my focal point. I've just got a scrap of collage paper out here, and I'm just rubbing out a little bit of gesso. I wanted it to feel kind of rough and not perfect. And I've got my butterfly stencil, one of the new stencils in the shop. I'm going to grab some raw umber. And I want to stencil this out kind of roughly. I don't want it to look perfect. So I've got my stenciling done, and you can see some areas are darker or lighter, but I wanted more rustic. And this is one of the techniques that I talk about in our very first video as we prep for all the pages. I'm just kind of watering that out and giving it a real rustic, vintage feel. So now that I've got my focal point done, I've grabbed a few other random scraps of paper that will help frame that focal point and really pull it away from the background. I'm putting some matte medium all over that page because some of those pieces of tape are still sticking up. Placing my focal point in the area that I want it, and then I'm going to frame it with those great vintage papers that I've got. I'm making them uneven. I don't want them to be perfect or square or anything like that. And you can see that I'm using my matte gel for this because there's a lot of texture on the page, and I want to be able to make sure that that's going to stick down, and with the matte gel being thicker, it will hold that down a little bit better. And just going over the page to make sure all my edges are stuck down. And now we get to play a little bit and add some highlights, some lowlights to our page. Using another one of the stencils, new stencils in the shop, I'm just using my finger. I want it to be rough. I don't want it to be perfect. And because there's so much texture on this, I know that it's not going to be perfect, a perfect stencil image, and that's not what I'm going for. Using some of the tissue paper that I stenciled out, and this is a perfect example of being able to choose exactly the amount, the shape for your project. Plus, there's a lot of texture on here. And these ones I wanted to be a little bit more bold and a little more perfect. So I wanted them to stand out because we need blacks and whites for contrast to really kind of make a page or a piece interesting, and to move the eye around, all the way around the page or piece, whatever you're working on. And because the tissue paper goes transparent, all the other under layers will show up. I'm just dabbing off that excess matte medium. You got to be careful because it can stick and pull up your tissue paper. Now I'm grabbing a smaller flat brush and I'm kind of tapping that off, and I'll tap it off onto my rag too. I want to do a little bit of dry brushing right over the top of that texture. All that tape and texture, that gesso will skim over the top of that texture and really highlight it, really bring it out. And I also want to come over some of the edges of my papers just to kind of integrate them into the piece so that they don't look like they're just sitting on top, and to kind of give it that vintage worn feel. Now I want to really draw the attention to the focal point, really pull it away, and add my finishing touches. I've got my General's charcoal pencil out here, and I'm just making marks, circling almost like a bullseye. Like here we are. And I'm bringing those marks out and around the page and to the top and to the bottom. My leading lines to my focal point. There's no doubt what that is. And I'm not on the scratchy marks that I just did. I'm not smushing them out like I will with the corners. And the corners, when I do this is adding weight to that focal point. It's pulling all those papers and creating a vignette, pulling them together and making them kind of all one piece. And separating that section from the rest of the page. I'm not doing all of the papers, just the corners. But again, it's adding weight to that focal point area. Adding a few more dots. I felt like it needed a little more black to kind of go along with the black stripes, so just so that it didn't feel so like I've got one thing here and one thing here. I wanted to kind of add more black to kind of balance it out. And I don't want those to feel perfect. I want them to feel rustic and messy like the rest of the page. So I'll come back in with the technique that we talked about in our first video and just kind of water those out. Once I get those pages out from behind my journal page, I can really kind of see clearly, and then I will shade my edges, which also helps me see if I need anything else. And that is it, my friends. Project 2 for this week of 30-minute art journaling is done. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you tomorrow.